Welcome back to the Holy Hodgepodge podcast, where you never know what you're going to get. I'm your host, Pastor Josh, and with me is Pastor Smith. Say hello to the people, Pastor.
Hello, everybody.
Today is episode number 21, and we are going to be talking about the pastoral call process in the LCMS. Now, this is a good topic to talk about in general, but also due to recent events with Pastor Smith having received a call, we thought it would be a timely topic to talk about. So we're going to use this as an opportunity to talk about, in general, the call process, because I don't know, Pastor, but if I had to guess, I would say there are more people than not that this whole call process thing is either very new or it's like, yeah, let me dust that off from the recesses of my mind. Because, in fact, I've heard you say this a few times, but it has been a while since any pastor has received an external call, like not including yours, where you were called from associate to lead pastor. How long has it been?
Well, I as far as I can tell, excluding that instance, I think the last time that a pastor at St. Paul had a call was either 2013, I think it was 2013, maybe 2014. But I mean, yeah, much more often. More recently, pastors have left because they've retired.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which, great problem to have.
Yeah.
So, like I mentioned, I think a lot of people maybe have heard the terminology before, but there's really a lot that goes into it, like quite a bit. So let's start really basic. In the Lutheran Church, what is a call? And you know, even when we use that word call, there are a few different ways of talking about it. So I guess I kind of asked a few questions there, but take whichever one you want to go with.
Well, it is, I guess well, I'll start here, because I remember in the seminary, one of the first classes, well, I think it was like in the first quarter. They were on quarters when I was there. I think they were on semesters
Yes.
when you were there. But first quarter, there was a class called Pastoral Ministry, and one of the first days they talked about, how do you know if you're a pastor or not? And they talked about a call, and they said basically every pastor probably has what you might call an inner call or inner calling to be a pastor. And that's, we've talked about this before, even as young children, you and I both felt a call to be a pastor, and that obviously held true. Maybe depending on the year, maybe it was like less or more or something, but we both went to the seminary, and I think most people that go to the seminary, they go based on a call that they feel inside that God probably wants me to be a pastor, and maybe people have told me that I'd be a good pastor, and that affirms it, and so then you go enroll in the seminary, you have a calling. You're not a pastor yet, though.
Nope.
You still, obviously you got to graduate and complete all the coursework and, be authorized, they have to say, yes, you have completed everything you need to do, you know everything, you agree with the teachings of the church, we will, you're open to receiving a call. But it's not until that external call comes from a particular congregation by the directing of God that you are an actual pastor.
Yeah.
And so that's that kind of just that inner versus external call. So then maybe you've been ordained into the office of the ministry, you have a call from a church. Then that way that I think the way that a lot of people hear the word call then is, oh, my pastor who's been a pastor for a while, I know he's called to this church, but then sometimes another church issues a call, and now there's two callings that this pastor has, and they have to determine which one God is going to also bless and affirm going forward as being his will for continued ministry in the church, capital C church, at that point. Yeah.
Which I don't know if this is I don't know if this is supposed to be an inner secret by us pastor folk, but whichever church God is, or whichever decision God is going to bless, it would be either. like God's will is done in our lives, and I think that's the kind of thing where it's like we have such freedom in life. Like I think about, this was really big for me in high school, and these things are not the same, but I think they apply the same. I saw this video where it was talking about, like, how do I know if this person is the one for me to spend my life with? And it's like, well, how many people are there in the world? There's a lot of opportunities to get that wrong. And in reality, it's not that there's a one person. It's you can make life work with any number of people. And so that's I think a cool thing is, like, pastors who receive a call take it very seriously, but I think that is a good thing that we have, that it's not like, oh man, if I mess this up, then God's will is not done. I've ruined one or both of these churches. I think that's, like, we have enough humility to realize, like, maybe it would have been logistically better and whatever to go this way, but even if I quote unquote make the wrong choice, like, God is still gonna bless that and work through that. And that's the thing about everything in our lives. Even, like, should I work at this job or this job? Well, there's no reason why I shouldn't, so do whatever job is going to make you happier or gives you more time with your family or whatever. So yeah, kind of a good freedom we have in, even when we're trying to decipher where God is calling us, to know that, like, at the end of the day, we're not messing up his plan if we don't.
Yeah, I think obviously God brings good out of even things that people mean for evil.
Yeah.
We hear that from the Joseph story in Genesis. We know that God can salvage things out of even big mistakes that we might make. I will say, though, I think that there is opportunity. Yeah, and as you're saying, like, most of the time, most decisions that we make in life are probably different shades of good, legitimate options. I think there could be opportunities, though, for pastors to sin when they're making a decision regarding a call, and we still, even then, maybe prioritizing the wrong things, or it's like, well, this church seems like, it's a more prestigious church, or it's a bigger church, or make more money at that church, or these kinds of things that are not. They're data points, maybe some of them,
Yeah.
but it's not like, oh, that your decision should not rest entirely on those things. Yeah, it's an interesting process, but yeah, I think there is a humility in knowing God is going to bless the decision. So pastors usually, I think, while there's a lot of wrestling that goes on, I think they hopefully don't obsess to the point of just paralysis.
Yeah.
Like, okay, I'm gonna be faithful. I'm gonna talk to people. I'm gonna pray, and then I'm gonna pray that God's gonna bless this decision, and we're gonna move forward whatever way that is. So yeah.
You said that it is an interesting process, and it really is. I think about how, I'll be honest, I don't know how all different church bodies do it, but I think of the two, I think, overarching ways, and if you know of more, by all means add. But so Lutheran Church has the call process. There are some denominations where it's just like any other job. You want to work here, you apply. Whereas I guess we would, for the Lutheran Church, it's initiated by the congregation, right?
Yeah,
so
yeah.
that's the Lutheran way. Other denominations, it is by the pastor.
Yeah.
So it's, apply for the job. But then in, like, the Catholic Church, and I think the Orthodox Church, it is more of like your bishop or whoever is going to send you here. Like, you are good with dealing with churches in crisis. Well, sorry, bud, but your time is up here because this church across the country has a crisis and really needs you.
Yeah.
Are there any others that you?
Yeah. No, I think that's in very broad strokes. There's some, like you've described, that like the higher ups in the church, they move you, and I think there's probably some level of input occasionally from the pastor, but I think sometimes it is like, nope, we gotta send you over here now. And those church bodies, some of them at least, I know the Methodist Church in particular has a reputation of sometimes every 5 years moving pastors around. I'm sure there are exceptions to that, and I may be uninformed on that. But then I have been, I don't know if I should admit this, but I have been to some conferences and things that are not LCMS conferences. Just and like kind of like here locally in the Cleveland area, I've gone to some just like a non-denominational church or something, and when there's a big gathering of pastors and church staff people, I have literally seen like there's been a wall of job postings that pastors can be like, oh, I am gonna like tear the little piece of paper off, like like at the library or at the grocery store or something. Like I'm gonna call this for guitar lessons, and I'm gonna also apply for this job at First Baptist Church, blah blah blah. And then you have the Lutheran Church that's a lot different, because it is. Now I don't want to go too far down this path, but there can be shenanigans that are done by both pastors and congregations trying to influence a call process, which just ought not to be done. And that's why, even technically speaking, these types of processes, when a congregation is looking for a pastor, they go through what like the district. So our church body, the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod, is divided into districts, typically by geography, but there's a couple that are not. And you're supposed to, as a congregation, seek help from the district to fill your pastoral vacancy.
Right.
Sometimes congregations will just start contacting pastors without going through the proper channels, and that's not always a good idea. It's like, well, we know this pastor somehow. We'll just look up his email address on his church website and we'll send him a message. I think less often, but I know it still happens, pastors will catch wind of a particular congregation that needs a pastor, and they'll unofficially apply, like, hey, would you consider me? And that's not supposed to happen in our church body. Yeah.
It kind of struck me as we were talking about these different ways of pastor to congregation being matched, and I think it's important to say this is not something that the Bible is clear on.
No.
And so I think, and we'll talk about this in just a moment, but I think that there are different ways that you can arrive at how to go about this, and I can't say that one is more right than the other. I mean, again, we're using broad brush strokes here. But like, we're doing the best with, it's not like, the one example we have, which maybe I would say we are the closest to being right. The closest thing we have that I can think of is in Acts when they cast lots.
I was just waiting. I was going to bring. If you didn't bring it up, I was going to bring it up. Yeah.
When they cast lots to determine who's going to replace Judas, and like that is it. With that, it is okay. God, whoever you want is who's going to be here, and we trust that it's going to happen. And we do see some of that where it's like, I think especially. We see it both ways, but I think especially coming out of the seminary, getting that first call, where you have less, like, this guy doesn't have a ministry career. Like, we don't know what he's like.
Yeah.
We're trusting God that we're getting who he's bringing here. But yeah, you were gonna say some more about that.
Well, no, I was just going to say, yeah, like the closest event in the scriptures would be Acts chapter 1, yeah, where they cast lots. The lot falls on Matthias, and he becomes the associate pastor. No, I'm just kidding. But then, yeah, the other guy's not chosen. And I always wonder, I wonder what happened with that guy. But
is it Barnabas?
No, his name, I think, was Justus, also called Barsabbas, also called something else. It's like, dude's got like 3 names. Remember there was some sermon where I referred to him as JBJ.
Joseph called Barsabbas, also known as Justus.
Okay, there we go. Okay, yeah. So it's like, pick a lane, man. That's why he didn't get elected, because he had a branding problem. He couldn't pick his name.
and the non-denominational folks would be like, "See, it's about how you brand yourself." No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah. Oh, what were we even talking about? Well, okay. So I can't remember what this was, but I remember I talked to, I think it was some district. I think it may have been. So when I did my vicarage, it was under the supervision of the district president of Oklahoma. I think he told me that there is a congregation in the Oklahoma district. I don't know. I can't say if they still do, but at least like 10 years ago, their official process was to cast lots.
I kind of like it.
Now they would get like a list from the district or something, but they would maybe have 4 names and they would just cast lots. Now I don't know, like, did they do a phone interview with the 4 guys first, and then they just cast lots? But yeah, it's very different nowadays. I think it does not always happen this way, but I think typically a pastor will go make an in-person visit once they have received a divine call. But my mom actually reminded me of this recently. So my uncle was a pastor. He's with Jesus now, but my uncle was a pastor in the LCMS. And at one point in time, I believe he was serving a church somewhere in Illinois, and he received a call from a church in Minnesota, and he just accepted the call. Like, he didn't go up and visit.
Wow.
And I don't even know, now again, maybe the only technology they would have had back then was a phone interview. I don't even know if he did a phone interview, because like I think that was done sometimes, but there are stories about where some guy just goes to the mailbox and checks the mail one day, and this is one thing I guess we should make clear. There is such a thing as call documents. That's a technical term.
Yes.
There are papers that are provided by the synod that congregations have to fill out when they issue a pastor a call, and a lot of it is information about the congregation. It might include duty. Well, it's not that it might. It will include duties that the pastor would have at this call, but it also has such things as like the finances and benefits, and like, is there a parsonage or not? So like the way that the congregation will care for the pastor and his family, and then also what the pastor's specific duties would be if he were to accept a call in this church.
Is there also stuff about the congregation, or is that a separate?
There is.
Okay.
There are like just kind of factual statistics and things like that about the congregation or about the geographical area. So it's like you can read through this stuff, and like it's you could, with prayer and your brain, you could make your decision based on what is in that envelope.
Yeah.
But that's what, at least as the legend goes in my family, my uncle got this in the mail, and he just prayed about it, and he accepted a call to Minnesota.
Wow.
Now, I mean, that's just, nowadays it's like you get Zoom interviews, and maybe you drive up, or the congregation flies you out somewhere, so it's a lot more. And I think it does bother people. I think that there are things like that it feels more corporate, It doesn't feel as pure. And I don't know. I have opinions, but maybe not super strong opinions either way. But
Right.
But even like from the when you're being called, when you're getting your first call, when you're about to graduate from the seminary, typically if you're going to be the only pastor at the church that's calling, they don't do an interview. So
Right.
when you're finding out where your first call is, you're likely hearing the name and the location of that church for the very first time as you're finding out that you're their pastor now.
Yeah.
If there's a team ministry, I think that they do interviews because I frankly, I think it's so that they can know if the pastors that are going to serve together can even get along.
Yeah.
Which
Which was the case for both of us going through that interview.
Yeah.
And I think it's more common that pastors get a soul just based on the number of churches, being a sole pastor, being the only pastor. I was plenty nervous call night where it's like, where's my life going to be? And I had a list, right? Like I knew there were 7 churches that I interviewed with, like a couple of them for X, Y, or Z reason. I knew it was not going to happen. So like realistically, it was like 3 or 4. I was still nervous. For those guys that have no idea,
Yeah.
man, that is nerve wracking.
Yeah. So and that the first church that a pastor goes to out of the seminary, that process is a lot different
Yes.
than subsequent calls that might come in.
Well,
yeah.
This is used at the seminary, and we joke about this, but in some ways, the call process is kind of like being drafted to a team in a sport.
Mm-hmm.
It's like you do interviews, you don't have much of a choice. I mean, technically you could refuse.
Yeah.
But like I don't think I've ever heard of anybody refusing a call. Like
I think it does happen. I think functionally that causes you to be blacklisted.
Yes, it's a problem. But then, analogies only go so far, right? But after that, then it's kind of more of like a free agent where it's like, quote unquote, you get to choose. So,
yeah, and I do think, we're sharing some of our experiences or telling the way it is. It's, and I know we'll bring this out more as we go along. It is a process that human beings have had to use their brains and to try to shape. Like, how will we actually use like resources and means and people to fill pulpits, right, with pastors. But I think any human being, whether it's in the LCMS or even in the other types of church bodies we've described the process, I am convinced that everyone believes God is the one running the show, though.
Yes.
So there are different there's different packaging about how this might play out. We're talking about the LCMS because that's presumably what most people are that are listening to this episode.
No, if you're not, reach out. We'd love to.
We'd
love to know.
Yeah, and it is fun to talk about these types of things, but it's a very interesting thing, and I think that it's a little bit, it's backward from how most people get jobs out in the real world, but it's the way that at least our church body does it, and we lift it all up in prayer and trust that the Lord is in charge of it all.
Yeah. So talking about how our church does it, let's talk about how we got to this point, shall we? So this story fascinates me. So when the not settlers, what's the word? Immigrants from Saxon Germany came over. Won't go into the details of that because that's not as important. But they came over and they had a few boats of people that were like most people coming to America were wanting some level of religious freedom, right? And so there are these good old Lutherans they're coming with their pastor, Martin Steffen. He's a rock star preacher. He's well beloved. I mean, enough so that people are changing their lives. They're moving across the ocean in a sense to follow him, right? Like, it wasn't about him, but also like I remember from some of my classes, like, he really was a charismatic person, like somebody you wanted to follow. Mm-hmm. And they came over to they ended up in Altenburg, I believe, Altenburg, Missouri, and
so not too terribly far away from St. Louis.
Correct.
Yeah.
And things were great until they weren't. It came out. It was discovered that their pastor, Martin Steffen, had improper sexual misgivings with some of his congregation members. I believe he had stolen money. He was abusing his power, and like, this was a really big crossroads for the people in Altenburg. And what they ultimately did, and I don't know if this is the right choice, but it's what they did, is they shipped him across the Mississippi River. Mm-hmm. And so it was excommunication at the same time as like
kind of being like ostracized from the community too,
or deserted, or whatever.
Yeah.
But then these people were like, oh no.
Yeah.
Like, we came here, this was our one pastor. Mm-hmm. Right? And I'm fuzzy on the details of how they went about quote unquote creating pastors, but it was something I'm guessing it was somewhat representative of the Catholic Church, where like there's from a how like they're raised up, and they've got the seal of approval from somebody above them, which I guess you could say not just the Catholic Church, it's us too, but they're like, we don't have that. And they had a lot of questions about, well, are we even a church anymore because we don't have a pastor? And thankfully they had somebody with them who maybe you've heard of, CFW Walther, Clyde Ferdinand Wilhelm, I think, is.
I'll trust you.
I would put 95% confidence. Clyde Ferdinand Wilhelm Walther, and he was kind of like the second in command while Martin Steffen was their pastor, and so he knew a lot of like the inner workings, and he was familiar with this, and he wanted to help them get to the conclusion of, well, just because we don't have a pastor doesn't mean we're not a congregation. And so he did a bunch of work, and one of his works that came from this is ultimately a book that he wrote called "The Congregation's Right to Choose Its Pastor." And so ultimately they determined that yes, they are still a church, and they don't need to, like, their identity was not tied, it wasn't tied into having a pastor in that regard. Like, them not having a pastor didn't delegitimize them in that way. And also, they didn't need to rely on, quote unquote, the forces that be above them to help get their next pastor.
Yeah, because I think they were like, some of them were just ready to pack up and go back home. They're like, we shouldn't even be here. We can't even have a church over here.
Yeah,
we
take us back.
We don't know if we have God's promise, to be with us as He has promised to be with His church. Yeah, so
they, and by the way, CFW Walther, which I think this was like late 1800s, early 1900s. Like a 25, like, I know he was around that turn?
I think it was much earlier, actually.
Oh, did I get the century wrong? Like the turn of the century?
Well, no, I think it was like kind of mid 1800s.
Okay. Well, then maybe this
Yeah.
is what.
Yeah.
Cause,
Well, even before that, because the synod was founded in 1847. I
okay.
believe.
Then I'm
So,
thinking of
yeah.
something else.
Yeah.
But yeah, where I was going with that ultimately was CFW Walther was the first president of the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod, and there's a lot more history that goes into this, and maybe we'll do something on it another time. But like that group from Saxon, Germany, led by CFW Walther, that is the formation of the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod. And so, yeah, and so I guess I've kind of already got at this, but ask kind of two questions kind of coming off of this. Is a church, is a congregation without a pastor, and is a pastor without a congregation?
Yeah. Yeah. So we and Walter did a lot. I mean, he did a lot of writing. I think probably coming out of this helped him formulate what will be the Lutheran theology of what the church is. Yes. And what makes a church. You know, what makes a lowercase c church a legitimate part of the capital C church. And I think the classic Lutheran definition is a church is found wherever the Word of God is preached in its truth and purity, and wherever the sacraments are rightly administered according to Christ's command. You know, so we've got baptism and the Lord's Supper being those. So it's and these things, kind of, I guess the gifts of Word and Sacrament belong to the church. They come from Christ Himself. And the church has them, and each local iteration of church, we call like the local congregation, has them. They have them whether they have a called pastor serving them at that particular time or not. Mm-hmm. And that's the way that it works is when a pastor is called, the congregation hands over to them the authority by virtue of the call to preach the word and administer the sacraments on behalf of the people in that place. Mm-hmm. That sounded probably very boring to a lot of people. It's kind of like I felt like I was in a seminary class for 90 seconds there. Yeah,
that's okay.
But I think I guess that's. Because it does come up sometimes, just the orderliness of the church. Like, I remember when I was in seminary, the professor was like, why can't a different person just get up and preach each week? And I was like, I don't know the answer to that. And it's like, well, it's for the sake of good order, but it's a particular office. The office of the holy ministry cannot be, well, it's according to the regulations of the church, at least, it is not filled by just anybody. It's not like you check the sign-up sheet to see who's playing pastor this week. Like, there are particular people who have been trained and rightly called to fill that function. And
that goes back to internal and external.
Yeah, and I think it's probably worth saying that, according to the customs, the orderliness of the church, there's a process where a man is ordained. Like, there's a special rite and kind of some ceremonies that go along with that. Those are not dropped from heaven. Like, I'd have to say these words exactly in this order, and then a guy becomes a pastor, and now he's totally different than he used to be. He's special and better than you. No, it's not the case at all. Right. He's filling this very special role, but it's the office, that we give honor and reverence to, rather than, like you and I are, in one sense, no different than anybody else that goes to church here.
Right, and
we do have a role that is set apart.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think that's an important distinction, because I've wrestled with this. Well, I've not wrestled with it, but I've thought about it, and I think that your explanation just really goes to it, because, man, there are plenty of people out there who, if we were to allow them to, could probably get up and give close to as good or maybe better of a sermon than us. But that's not the qualification.
Yeah.
Now, is that part of what makes a pastor, being able to convey God's word in a good, true, and relatable way, or however you want to describe it? Yes, that's part of it.
Yeah.
But that keeps it from, like you said, who's preaching this week, who's playing pastor, and this, I feel like I heard this a lot in the seminary, and I do say it sometimes in various ways, but the phrase "God is a God of order," like that is.
Yeah, Paul talks about that in
Yes.
Corinthians. I mean, that's like a main theme that he kind of has in Corinthians, like God is a God of order and peace.
Yes.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's highly important to highlight. It's not to say that like somebody else doesn't have the skills. You can have the skills but not have the calling.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. So hopefully that makes sense. Just the way that it works, at least in the, I think that's how we've described it is not how every church body would describe it.
Right.
But a lot of them would. And there are sometimes there are different denominations because there are significant differences in how they view the pastoral office. But that's maybe a topic for a different episode.
Right.
But and then I think your other question was, is a pastor if they don't have a congregation? That's a little bit of an interesting the way to phrase that, I guess. But you might use an example of there could be like a retired pastor, right? We would not say, well, they cease to be a pastor now, because, well, I mean, we know there's plenty of retired pastors that are doing, they are serving churches. They don't usually have a call to be the pastor in that place, but they will be fulfilling the duties of the office of pastor for a time to care for that congregation. Because again, that congregation has, using their authority, they have asked, will you come and publicly, do word and sacrament ministry among us? And sometimes that's, in difficult situations, it's like a church doesn't have a regular pastor, and they really are trying to fill out. There almost is a sign-up sheet.
Yeah.
But they're trying to fill that out. But no, a pastor by virtue of his ordination, unless, kind of like the example that you gave of the Martin Stephan back in the early days, unless a pastor has been disqualified from, and we say disqualified because there are several passages in the New Testament where Paul lists qualifications for ministry. So if you can disqualify yourself from being a pastor above reproach, in a variety of ways, then it's like, okay, then you would be no longer a pastor. And there are formal ways that, even in our church body, it's like there are guys, these men are on the roster of the synod. They are rostered pastors. And then maybe these other ones, well, they used to be, but they've been disqualified, they've been removed. But everybody, whether they currently hold a call or not, they are pastors.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of like, a player in the NFL might not have a team, but that guy, he's still a quarterback, he just doesn't currently play quarterback for a team, so like it's kind of that.
Yeah. I don't know, to use a personal, we were foster parents for a while. Like, we were equally foster parents whether we had a placement at a particular time or not. Like, we were still like licensed foster parents. I don't know. They're just, anybody else could give other examples too, but yeah.
So we've kind of talked about what the call is, how we do it in the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod, how we got here. Now let's get really specific, because I've heard this, I'm sure you have before, because like you said before, this is backwards from what like you would say a quote unquote typical job is. And some people I think some people when they are finding out about the call process kind of get offended because they would look at it and they would say, well, this church is trying to poach our pastor. They're trying to steal our pastor. So, you know, how is it not poaching? Like how should we think about that? Why and how do we go about, or maybe the why do we go about getting pastors that way? Again, ask multiple questions. You can take whichever.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I am a little bit curious to know, like, at some point in our history, and by our I mean the LCMS, maybe there was like a better total number of pastors, where it, I don't know, theoretically didn't, maybe it's like, oh, well, my pastor got called away, but there's so many other men trained to be pastors, God will send us another one, in a few months or something.
Yeah.
But there's such a shortage of pastors these days that it really can be like if your pastor takes a call and he was the only pastor at your congregation, sometimes you're waiting multiple years.
How long was St. Thomas?
Yeah, so our sister congregation, St. Thomas, I think it was nearly 3 years that they. Now they had a vacancy pastor there serving them every single week, but he was retired. But
and more just doing the Sunday morning duties rather than some of the other pastoral things.
Correct. Yeah. So a lot of times, if a pastor if they don't have a called pastor at the time, there may be a retired pastor or sometimes we'll say a vacancy pastor. Sometimes that's a pastor who has a call to another local church, and they're maybe each congregation has like staggered their worship times to such a way that the pastor can serve the congregation to which he's called and then drive over later at a time that works to fill there, and they might have like a day in the office at that congregation. So I mean it's like a stretching thin, it's trying to do the best that they can to care for this congregation, but it's not the way that it ought to be, So I think the poaching thing, because I do think people use that word sometimes. I think the best, the holiest way to look at it is from the congregation's perspective. We need a pastor, and we've gone through the proper channels. We've gotten some names of pastors. We have talked to some pastors. We believe this pastor would serve us well, so we'll formally ask him to be our pastor. We issue him a call. And then you sit back and say, it's in God's hands. If God wants him to be our pastor, he will be. You probably do feel a little bit funny about, well, I know we would be taking him away from a different congregation, but I guess it is the established way for pastors or for churches to be filled. The crass way to say it is there might be a winner and a loser in each outcome, and there's pain and there's hurt, in these processes. But I would say you have to trust that God's will is being done, even in the short term. Like you might be upset. Oh, I can't. How dare they take my pastor or something? What are we gonna do now? There might be some ill will there, I think, and that those are legitimate human feelings to have, right? But I think you have to trust that God is leading the process. Even though we might quibble with the way that it's actually done, we still have to trust that God is going to send his workers whom he has raised up into the harvest field where he needs them to be.
Yeah. As you were talking, I looked up what comes up on Google is that nearly 1 in 5 churches in the LCMS has a vacancy.
I may be wrong about this, but I think the number of churches that are without a full-time pastor right now is somewhere between 5,000 and 6,000.
Yeah.
and we can edit that out because I may be wildly wrong. But
No, I've heard
I
that
feel
too.
like, well, so we just had another, I don't know, we just had the synodical convention, and one of the big topics was how to form more pastors.
Yeah.
And I think that's a statistic that was quoted a good amount, was like, we have this many thousands of churches that don't have a pastor right now that want one.
Yeah, and the very sad, I'll say kind of scary truth is that is going to get much, much worse because
Okay, can I just interrupt?
Yeah.
I think the number of congregations that I just gave is actually the total number in the synod.
Okay.
So I think it's somewhere in it's I think it's north of 1,000 though that don't have a church. So that was a wildly I just snoped myself just right here.
Well,
just fact checked myself.
hey,
So when I said that, I was like, "There's no way that's many," because I think there's only like 120 in our district.
Well, hey, integrity from Pastor Smith. Nobody would have been. They would have been none the wiser.
The first time I've ever been wrong was live on this podcast.
Yeah, right.
Sorry, I
good.
totally interrupted you.
I don't know. I don't. Not that I don't trust them. I don't know how they go about this, but figuring how this is going to be. But they're projecting in the next 10 or so years that when all the baby boomers retire, we're going to be that. I don't know if that number is going to grow to or be an additional, like 3,000, is what I've heard.
Yeah, I know we're kind of right on the cusp, but kind of in the middle even of that kind of baby boomer pastor bubble.
Yeah.
Popping. Yeah.
And that's that. We say that not to scare you, although it is one of those things that like you let the genie out, you can't put it back. You can't control how it affects people, but Jesus is still Lord of the church. He's going to provide, but it also is just it's the reality, right? And so I feel like at least every other week, one of us is praying, Lord, send more workers into the harvest. And that's why. Like, in an ideal world, you won't have to call a pastor from another congregation because there are so many that, like, oh, this church of 150, here's a second pastor, right?
Yeah.
But now it's like, and my heart goes out to the smaller congregations where it's like, if you have 45 or under, like the chances of getting a pastor are they're lower because there are other congregations that have more people and are going to be more stable. It's in a vacuum. You could say like more people, more stability, right?
Yeah.
And so what we end up seeing is that you have to have a merging between these two congregations that are 20 miles apart, and hey, we've got 30 people, you've got 15. It makes more sense for us to be together than it does apart, and maybe we can get pastor then. So yeah.
Well, and I think that is the issue, that the only way, I mean, I'll oversimplify, but like the two main ways to get a pastor are get one straight from the seminary, or take one, poach one, call one from another congregation. The very short version of the conversations about how can we solve this problem is, well, what about raising up people from our own congregation to become pastors? Because typically, if someone goes to the seminary, like there might be somebody from St. Paul that goes to the seminary. That person, it's not like we can just be like, dibs, we get them right back, right? Once they go through all the schooling, they come back to us. No, that person kind of belongs to the church at large, and then through the process, like the seminaries with the district presidents and whatnot, they decide where that person is going to go once they've been properly trained and all that. There are some mechanisms by which congregations can raise up their own pastors. They can go through programs from the seminaries, even online primarily, they're serving in the church, but there are a lot of restrictions for how that goes, and it's not a typical pipeline by which congregations get pastors. Now, maybe there will be more options to that end as time goes on. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Which, as a word of encouragement to the listeners, I would say, like, to what you were saying, Pastor, see some responsibility amongst yourselves. Like, because we have, on any given weekend, roughly 450 people. That's a lot of people to know and see all of the skills and abilities that they have, and whether it's a man that God is calling to the office of ministry. And so if you, like, if you see qualities in a guy who you're like, I think he could be a pastor, like, bring it to our attention. Ask, a perfect way to bring that up to that person is, has anybody ever talked to you about, or have you ever thought about being a pastor, right? Like, just planting that seed. So yeah, just to put some of that on the listener's plate as well.
Yeah.
So let's go even more specific when talking about the call process. So the pastor has received the call papers. He has been informed that this congregation is calling him to be their pastor. How does that process work? Like, going through it. How does that? What are some of the things that go into that process?
Yeah, and I had an idea of how that would work until recently. I have experience with it, but yeah, there are several documents that I received from either from peers or from, like, the official higher ups in the district and the synod that kind of gave some guidance for, here are some of the things that you ought to consider in that process. And I was struck by all of that kind of stuff. It was very godly. It was very there's a lot of humility involved. Prayer is the biggest thing, but you really are trying to seek what is God's will and what will be the best outcome. I was thinking about it from the three different entities, being myself and my family as one, and then the two congregations, and you're trying to discern, okay, what would maybe have the most positive, or at least the least negative impact on God's kingdom.
Yeah.
And there's a few questions, I guess, that this one document in particular asked that was helpful for a pastor to consider. Things like, am I still needed where I am? Trying to, like, have a real, really think about that deeply. Don't you got to be, at the same time, you kind of have to think, okay, I do have particular giftings that I bring to the table, but also have humility, thinking, truly, either of these congregations will be fine without me. Yeah. The churches will stay open if Pastor Smith, Pastor Josh, like, if we're not around, like, the church will continue. Yes. It's based on Christ, not on a particular human being. Christ, not that Christ isn't a human being. Yeah, that's not a heresy. But am I still needed where I am? Are there benefits to the current congregation if I stay, or if I leave? You might have to take a look in the mirror sometimes and think, like, I was thinking about this. I bet there would be some things that would be better if I left, and you have to be real about that. Would I be escaping? Are you running away from something? Are you running now? Like, are there just problems that you just don't want to face? Are there difficult challenges ahead that like maybe I should be the one to stay and deal with those things?
Which you're talking about, like, sinful ways of going about it. I think that could be something where it's like, I've got this member who does this, and I know they're not going to want to hear it, so I'm just going to use this as a reason. Like, no, like Jesus has called you to go to that brother or sister with the problem, and so by you not doing that, you're sinning. And so, that's it's tying with what you were saying before.
Yeah, but there's and there's more too. You do want to think about well, you want to think about yourself to some extent too. If it's you, I think especially if you have a family,
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot more considerations there too, because you have a vocation as husband, father, as well, not just as pastor. So you do have to be thinking about, okay, what impact will it have on my family? And then, you want to think about, can God, I am a particular human being, different than than most other people, as a human being, and even as a pastor, how could God maybe, where could He use my particular set of skills better? I guess to use a different phrase, which will be a better fit maybe,
Mm-hmm.
because I think you can have objectively a good pastor and objectively a good congregation, and they just might not fit that well together,
Right.
maybe. And so I think to have the openness to God telling you there's somebody else that's going to fill that church. It's not going to be you, even though maybe there's some things that you would be excited about with that. So I think it is a very godly process, and you want to just commit the whole thing to prayer. And I think congregations tend to approach these things that way.
Mm-hmm.
I know, around here I've heard a lot of people saying that they're praying, and anyway.
And I think specifically, and while it's tough, and you've mentioned this too, and I've heard people say this, praying that God's will is done,
Mm-hmm.
right, is one of those things that, like, so growing up, I think before I was 10 or 11, I had my two pastors that I had that were called away, and like that can hurt. Like I remember crying like hard
Mm-hmm.
the day that their last Sunday, right?
Yeah.
Like you want your pastor to stay, unless there's always gonna be situations where people don't. But that's aside the point. But like I think as hopefully as like a mature Christian, you're able to pray in a not selfish way,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because, and that's the thing, like God's will is better. Like
Mm-hmm.
He knows what He's doing.
Yeah.
And I just think, like, how many churches have there been something where it's like this beloved pastor who was great left,
Mm-hmm.
and the person who took their place helped them grow in ways that they weren't, right?
Yeah.
Like it, when there is like there's hurt and there's loss and all these feelings when a person leaves, but
Mm-hmm.
and that's part of the cool thing about like the fact that we call it the call process, because we do believe that this is not just like happening by chance, like even the drawing of the straws, like or not drawing straws, casting of lots with the disciples, like to them it was random, but God already knew and had His purpose in line.
Yeah.
And so you never know how God is working through this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that's where you have to remember, well, on any side, whether you're the pastor or whether you're the congregation, just think, it's Christ is the stabilizing force for the church.
Yes.
I know we're all susceptible to sometimes being drawn to like a church or even other parts of life, maybe by like the personality of a certain individual, but it really, and I think I want to say that the LCMS is probably a little bit more protected from kind of like a cult of personality type of thing.
We don't have the rock star
than some other
pastors.
church bodies.
Yeah.
But we're also sinful.
Yes.
But I think the emphasis on, word and sacrament ministry, I think it protects us a little bit more, and it protects congregations from their pastors too, from feeling like they're all that, right?
Yes. And you saying that just makes me think. I think one of the strongest parts of the LCMS is that protection, right?
Mm-hmm.
The structure that we have allows to, at the same time, protect the pastor and the congregation,
Yeah.
and like not leave either of them out to dry,
Mm-hmm.
because like some church bodies, it's like, well, you lose a pastor,
Yeah.
tough, you got to find one.
Yeah.
Whereas
Yeah.
like we have this interconnected web of like, here's this pastor and here's this information about them,
Mm-hmm.
and that kind of thing. And
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
that is one of our greatest strengths in the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod.
Yeah. And I think that's the thing. Congregations should be thinking, we need this office of pastor. And yeah, I wanna get close to my pastor, like as an individual person, but it's not, the sky's not falling. Christ is still the Lord of the church, and there will be the next guy.
Yeah. And with that, like,
Yeah.
if I ever take a call, like, I hope people cry when I leave. Like, that's not a bad, like, that's not a bad
Yeah.
thing to say. You want
Yeah.
to have that effect,
Yeah.
but also with the understanding of like, it's not about the person.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
like, because if you, I say that because like,
Mm-hmm.
that shows that you've had an impact. That's what I mean.
Yeah.
Not that like, oh no, how will we
Yeah.
ever,
Yeah, because again, like, I'm on the other side of the coin is, this is an embodied thing. Like, God, there is a beauty that God calls a particular man to serve in a particular place to particular people, and do their baptisms and do their weddings and do their funerals and walk with them through the particular awful things and wonderful things, and that, yeah, like, there should be joy and tears and all that kind of stuff. Like, that's the beautiful thing.
Yeah.
But then in the more heartless, logical, cold, clinical thing is, you'll get another guy and you'll be fine. Which is also true.
Yeah, both are true at the same time. All right. Well, anything else that we have not talked about that you want to bring up?
No, I think just having a regular prayer for God to lead and guide His church the way that He will is a good thing.
Yeah.
To keep our heads screwed on straight.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So hopefully you listeners have enjoyed this. We're fully aware that this is odd, but this is how things work in our church body. So I guess a few things to conclude. One, Jesus is still Lord of the church. Praise be to Him for that. Two, pray that God sends workers into the harvest so that churches have good and faithful pastors, and that we don't have to take from another. And three, pray for your pastors, right? Your pastors seek to follow God's will and lead the people here at St. Paul, and each pastor at their congregation is the same. So, yeah. Thank you for joining us on this episode of the Holy Hodgepodge. Be sure to tune in next time, where you never know what you're going to get. Goodbye.